Warning! The following review may contain spoilers for the visual novel Fate's Day Night. While no specific plot points will be set outright, there will be text on screen describing the events of the novel. I will do my best to keep any to all spoiler text out of the review, but do keep this in mind whenever you read the text on the screen. I will only showcase footage from the Fate route of Fate's Day Night, but there will also be stills from the other routes. Please keep this in mind when you are watching the review. Warning! The following program may contain coarse language, strong violence, and brief sexuality. This video was designed for a mature audience, and viewer discretion is advised. Childe of Shade Reviews, Review number 12, Fate's Day Night. It is a well-known fact that inserting historical or real-world persons or objects into a fantasy setting can vastly improve the reader's interest in the work. Various pieces of fiction take advantage of this, and it can be a great way to introduce young minds to myths or legends that have been inscribed into humanity's subconscious. Persona 3 and 4 teach players about Shinto and Greek myth, all while showing the significance that those figures had. Recently, Ready at Dawn released The Order 1886, whose setting is all about King Arthur's knights in Victorian London. The semi-popular Bloody Jack books deal with Jackie Faber's various misadventures during the 19th century and the events that happened during those times. While it isn't always a knockout success, it can be very interesting to watch and see how the author twists those events into a fascinating story. But what if we tried something different? What if instead of going back in time to write a story, we instead brought our heroes of myths and legends into our own story? What if we made it about a death game akin to Deadliest Warrior with a little bit of Hunger Games mixed in along with it? Well, I can't claim that was going on during the various employees of Type Moon Studios' heads. After all, both those things didn't exist at the time. I can say that something along those lines gave birth to Fate's Day Night, a popular visual novel that has spun off in various books and games, and even 2 animes and movies. While it may still be a somewhat niche title here in America, it has become somewhat of a classic in the anime fandom, and consistently comes up as a topic. Personally, my first experience with the series was the fantastic Fate Zero, which I watched in early 2014 and fell in love with its dark themes and great storytelling. The much-hated 2006 Studio Dean adaptation of Fate's Day Night, which I was surprisingly entertained by. While it wasn't a masterpiece, it was charming in many ways, and at the very least was entertaining to watch. And when Ufotable announced that they were going to return the series with Unlimited Blade Works, I quickly snatched up the visual novel to go through the source material. So does this master have a servant that can cause stars to fall to the earth and succumb to its will? Or should it have gotten out of the Holy Grail War as soon as it started? Ladies and gentlemen, tune in and find out. Life hasn't been easy for the young and headstrong Shiro Emiya. When he was a little boy, a disaster struck his home of Fuyuki City and killed his parents and most of the populace at the time. Scarred emotionally and physically, Shiro was about to give up on life until a stranger named Kiritsugu Emiya saves him. After being saved and taken to a hospital, Shiro is adopted by Kiritsugu, where he continues to live his life under his wing and soon discovers that the man is a magus, a magic user in this world. Amazed by his new father's powers and his caring and heroic personality, Shiro vows to become a superhero and save and help everyone that he can. Years pass and Kiritsugu dies, leaving Shiro his residence to take care of. But fortunately, he is not alone, for he spends time with Kiritsugu's friends Taiga Fujimura and his underclassman Sakura Matoi. Life seems to go on as normal until a series of bizarre gas leaks and murders seem to happen at random. The gas leaks leave people drained of life and energy, while the murders don't have any rhyme or reason to them. But with his father's training, Shiro shouldn't have anything to worry about. That is, until one night after cleaning the dojo for his friend, he discovers magical figures fighting in the schoolyard. Amazed and terrified, he quickly flees the scene only to be caught by a blue man with a spear and is impaled and left for dead. Slowly sinking into death's clutches, he then suddenly wakes up to find that his wound has strangely been healed, and in fear for his life, flees to his home for shelter. Unfortunately, the man with the spear follows Shiro home to attack him, and in a desperate panic, Shiro flees into his shed in hope of finding a weapon. There, he accidentally summons his servant, Saber, a heroic spirit that was summoned to serve him in a conflict known as the Holy Grail War. After a short fight with the Blue Man, who reveals himself as Lancer and the noble hero Kukulin, he flees the scene, and Shiro and Saber discover Rin Tosaka, a fellow classmate of Shiro and of the Red Servant Archer. Together, they, depending on your choice, team up and vow to put an end to the war once and for all, and maybe learning the secrets about this devious conflict. For the sake of spoilers, I'll stop there, but thankfully there's plenty to talk about in terms of layout, themes, and messages. I'll start with Fate's Day Night's rather unique layout due to it being a visual novel. You see, Fate's Day Night is divided into 3 different routes that have various different endings and choices that you make. The first one is the Fate route, whose main heroine is Saber, Shiro's servant, and their quest to obtain the Holy Grail. The themes of this route mostly center around maintaining your beliefs no matter what happens, even if your beliefs can be flawed at that. It's also the shortest, in my opinion, the sweetest route, since it stars my favorite character in the series. I'm not too keen on them sexualizing Saber in the way they do. I know these things have to sell somehow. The next route is Unlimited Blade Works, which follows Rin Tosaka as the main heroine and deals with the same themes that the Fate route did in a somewhat negative light. It shows how far you can fall if you just blindly cling to your belief, and has a rather negative view on what a hero does. In terms of writing, I think it's the best written, with plot twists that feel genuine and events that come off as extremely tense. However, I gotta say that it's my least favorite arc out of the 3, mainly because there can be moments that push your suspension of disbelief and is a tad bit too long in some sections. Lastly, there's Heaven's Feel, whose heroine is Sakura and follows him sacrificing everything for the one you love. It's a very dark and very melancholy story. If it just wasn't so bloody long. Seriously, about half of the content is spending too much time with Sakura, and while that works fine from a character development perspective, it doesn't work from an entertainment perspective. So much of it could have been cut out for the heavier story material. I wanted to like it more, but when it takes me over 80 hours to complete a single route, I think there's just some stuff that you could have taken out. Anyway, how long have I been playing this? Oh, jeez, yeah, let's not look at that. Overall, I think the stories are definitely worth experiencing, just don't do what I did and try to knock out all 3 at once. They're great when tackled every once in a while, but can be a bit overwhelming when consumed as a whole. Alright, now that we've determined this hero's name, let's look him up in this book and see what his weakness is. For the most part, Fate's Day Night has a pretty solid cast of characters, with, in my opinion, Saber being the main standout. Pretty much everyone is likable in some way, except for the villains who come off as complete sacks of crap in human form. First, there's Shiro, and the main protagonist for all 3 arcs, and serves as a cipher for the players to control. I know a lot of people hate Shiro for being a goody two-shoes, but as he goes through the arcs, I feel that title is a bit undeserving. Sure, he's a bit of an idiot at the beginning, but over time, he does develop as a character and learns that his stupidity can get someone killed. Next, there's Saber, who I really can't talk about too much since her backstory is a massive spoiler, and in my humble opinion, what makes her so interesting. I'll just say that she's polite, caring, and incredibly likable, with her fatal flaw being a past that she wants to change because she feared that she did not do enough. She's a very popular character in the anime world, and if you give this or the anime a shot, you can easily see why. After that, there's Rin Tosaka, who's basically the token tsundere of the cast with a short fuse but otherwise caring personality. I would talk about the rest of the cast and how they interact with our leads, but I would be going into spoilers, so I'll instead talk about how I feel about them. Like I said, I do like the cast of Fate's Day Night, even though they're not as serious or deep as the cast of Fate Zero. As far as gripes go, I really only got 2, which is the way the story is split up and certain motivations for some characters. I know it's somewhat of a tradition to have certain arcs dedicated to key characters, but splitting them up into 3 different arcs kind of works against Fate's Day Night's favor. If you focus on just one arc and trying not to get all of the endings available, it is almost certain that characters will either disappear completely or you'll miss an important detail about them. I know many of you out there are saying, yeah, well maybe they should get the full picture by completing the game, which I would respond with, what if they don't have the time or the patience? You're going to spend a lot of time doing nothing in this game, and even though you can skip scenes after you play them, you're going to be clicking that button a lot. And I can vouch for how strong of an advocate I am, trying to get the most out of an experience and trying to slim down the least amount of grief you can get. After all, I have so much entertainment in my backlog and very little time to play any of it, and I'm not saying that anything over 30 hours is automatically bad either. I just wish that the developers would realize that some of us would like to play more than just 10 games a year and call it good. But I'm getting off topic now, and I really need to talk about some of the villain's motivations, which I felt were a little lacking, especially when compared to its prequel Fate Zero. I won't go into specifics, but I will say that I think it's safe to say that most of the antagonists can be either summed up as because I can or because I'm a massive dick, with maybe the exception of Castor. It's pretty disappointing because if they were given a bit more time, I think they could have stood out as more as actual characters than one-dimensional barriers. I know, there's some brief moment in some arcs where they actually go into why some characters characters do what they do, but they're kinda just throwaway lines that tie into my complaint that some of the arcs are too long. Overall though, I really did enjoy the cast of Fate's Day Night and only have those 2 complaints about it. I'm sure I'm gonna upset people by saying I like Shiro better than the villains of the show, but I'm always looking for a better perspective of things, and maybe you can present a better argument than just he sucks. Anyway, that's a wonderful replica you got there, Shiro. Why don't you hand it to me so I can comment about its appearance and presentation? Visual novels aren't exactly known for pushing technical limits due to their cheap budgets and over-reliance on scrolling text over static images. In fact, pretty much anyone can make a visual novel easy if they have a knack for writing or drawing and don't mind doing some basic coding. But fortunately, most can be pretty beautiful if enough effort is put into the stills and art style. To this day, I've played only a few visual novels and have yet to experience a single one that has made my jaw drop or made me go, wow, this looks divine. But for Fate's Day Night, yeah, it's pretty okay. Nothing amazing, but I do think that the art style is iconic enough to stand out. Considering that this came out in 2004, it holds up tremendously better than a lot of stuff that came out at the time. Character designs are nicely detailed from the servants to the main characters, though I wish I could say the same thing about side characters and environments. They don't look bad by any stretch of the imagination, but it's pretty easy to tell that not much effort was put into the boring school outfits and Japanese scenery. What doesn't look great are the various zoom-ins and outs on the still images, which can get a little pixelated, ironically, considering that Type Moon style has such a clean and crisp look. There are some actual effects thrown into the fighting scenes, mostly the ones involving Saber, but they're often too short to really appreciate them. Stream transitions and movements are PowerPoint-esque quality with fade-ins and quick transitions that I can replicate myself if I wanted to. Although one great addition is that I love the codex that is given to Shiro in every arc, which gives a rundown of every servant's abilities, noble phantasms, history, and current status ranging from who they are currently serving to whether they're alive or not. It's extremely detailed, and I've spent more than a fair share of the game poring over the facts of every servant and their backstories. The game also holds a gallery for stills and an amusing side attraction called the Taiga Dojo, which gives you hints about what to do next if you die during the course of the novel. There clearly was a lot of effort put in here, and I'm glad to see that it paid off, because if you haven't delved into this while you played the game, you're really missing out. Overall, the presentation is really solid, and there was quite a bit of heart and soul poured in here, but at the same time it is a visual novel, so don't expect it to blow your mind. Hear that clanging sound? I think it's 2 servants fighting. Let's go observe them in sound, shall we? Okay guys, I'm gonna be completely honest here. There's almost nothing to talk about when it comes to Fate's Day Night sound because of 2 things. Number 1, its only available language is Japanese, which means I have no idea what they're saying, and I have to completely rely on the text to get an idea of what's happening. Number 2, there's nothing particularly memorable about soundtrack besides the main theme. It's pretty much a paint-by-numbers visual novel soundtrack, which means it turns off during serious moments and has sad ambient music during lulling and heavier scenes. You and I have been listening to the soundtrack throughout the entirety of this review, and the only songs that stood out were the OP theme, This Illusion, and the piano rendition of that, which plays during the Heaven's Feel route. I literally cannot remember when most of the tracks were played, and that's a bad sign considering that I read this novel over a 7-month period. It's not disgusting, but it's nothing special either. So with that, let's have Saber bring down the Grail and let's wrap up this war, shall we? Through its various strides at being something meaningful and mostly successful attempts at bringing out emotions, Fate's Day Night is a very good visual novel, albeit a flawed and overbloated one. It has good characters, a wonderful premise, and plenty of lore and text for the most die-hard fans to dive into, but at the same time it can be extremely overbearing to newcomers of the series with its epic plot and vast number of rules and laws that the reader needs to understand. The 3 different arcs seem like a good idea on paper, but there isn't enough content spread evenly between them, and one that gets the grandest change far outstays its welcome by a massive 30 to 40 hours. While I did enjoy my time with it, I can't say that I ever want to go back and get the harem ending for Unlimited Blade Works and the true ending for Heaven's Feel for fear of how long it would take, especially when I got the much underrated Studio Dean's Fate's Day Night and the, well, To be honest, I do have an opinion on Ufotable's Unlimited Blade Works adaptation, but it's not a popular one, and I want to save that for a rainy day or whenever it comes back for a second season. There is a movie coming out for Heaven's Feel, but I'm going to go on record here and say that I have pretty much no faith for that. Even if it's, say, 5 parts long, it's going to take a ton of effort to fit that behemoth into a film, and it's quite the task that I doubt even the very talented Ufotable can do. But yeah, in the end I did like it, and while it may not be the first thing I would recommend to people trying to get into visual novels, it's definitely on my list of ones you should play. At the very least, watch some of the animes, and if you like what you see, give it a shot, because trust me, you won't regret it. So after watching a fight for far too long, finally saying screw it and just telling Saber to use her noble phantasm to finish the foe off, I've decided to pass judgment on Fate's Day Night and give scores appropriately to story, characters, presentation, sound, and overall enjoyment of the novel. Starting with story, which gets a good 8.25 for being engaging and original, if a bit too bloated and overwritten in some instances. Next, there's characters, which gets a solid 7.75 for its likable and memorable cast, but suffering from some inconsistent villains. Succeeding from that is presentation, which gets an acceptable 7.0 for having great art that can stand the test of time and an in-depth codex, but conforming to visual novel limitations and having rather cheap scenes to showcase motion. After that was sound, which gets rather meh 6.0 for hardly being memorable, at least having a catchy theme. Finally, and without further ado, there's enjoyment, which gets a pretty good 7.5. Tallying all these scores together, I ultimately give Fate's Day Night a good 73% and give the recommendation to rent/borrow before buying. I really think that this novel is a great one and deserves the praise that it constantly gets. However, I would never in a million years tell people to play this over watching the animes due to its ridiculous length and somewhat tough barrier to penetrate through with its lore. If you're a fan of the series, I highly suggest that you check it out. Just be warned that it's going to be a long one. So you may be wondering, well, how do I get a hold of this novel, which I have to respond with, you kinda can't! The novel was never localized for North America, and in any way of acquiring it legally will cost you up to $300 if you're lucky. So while I don't condone piracy, you're going to have to go that route to get this, and if you feel bad about doing it like me, there's a PS2 version on Amazon, and I'll leave the link in the description. Just be wary that it only works on Japanese PS2s. In order to translate it into English, you'll need to do some illegal activities as well. For other recommendations, I'll start with the Karo no Kyokai movie series, which is also based on a Type Moon visual novel. Contains similar material and subject matter, and I think that many of you that have seen Fate's Day Night have seen this as well. Next, there's this is a bit of a random one, but I'm going to go with the Assassin's Creed series in its entirety. Yes, I know they're almost two completely different things, but they have similar elements, including assassins, magical MacGuffins, and historical elements. Not the most on point of recommendations, but I think it's worth a shot. Well, that's it for me for everyone. Thanks so much for watching, and prepare yourselves for the sequel of the most popular video on this channel. Hopefully it will be up pretty soon, as I don't have to keep you all waiting, but I'll try my best. Thanks again everyone, and I'll see you next time.